Mostly I want to focus on how you can use NLP to empower you and your clients. That's what we'll be talking about mostly. So what's the point? I want you to redesign this. Why don't you use this information to redesign some things about yourself, feelings, perceptions, beliefs, and redesign your interactions with others. So when you actually harness the power of the information, you can actually change how you perceive other people's thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and speech. And then you can work with that in a way that is advantageous to them and to you. The point is also to change your focus. Ultimately, anytime we make any good change as a therapist, as a coach, as a practitioner, you're helping people change their focus, their unconscious focus. We'll talk about that in a second. And ultimately, when you help people do that, you're increasing wholeness and you're increasing their ability to be at cause rather than effect, to feel like they are the agent creating their circumstances rather than like they are the effect of things happening in the universe. And whether or not, we all have different philosophies around predestination, or, there's many spiritual philosophies around that. Yet when someone feels as though they are just at the effect of what's happening to them, that is in general, or NLP assumes that's in general, a disempowering stance. It would be better for them to feel at cause rather than at effect. What is NLP? Essentially, it is the modeling of human excellence. There's many people who talk about this online. You can look at that. What I mean by that is, some people think it's like weird hypnosis, or some people think it's like, negotiation tactic 101. I imagine that it's simply using what we know about the brain to model human excellence. Essentially, the creators of NLP asked the question, these people do things really well, the, really highly successful people of the world. How did they do that? What's evident about what they did? And they got down to the structure of their psychology that allowed them to do amazing things. That's kind of how NLP started. Okay, so the people who have done other webinars with me before have probably seen this, this diagram. This is the NLP communication model. You can't do a webinar on NLP without talking about the NLP communication model, because it underlies pretty much everything that NLP posits. The NLP communication model says that the map is not the territory. What that means is that we have perceptions of things that are not actually the things themselves. So when we observe external events, we automatically have to delete, distort, and generalize the information that we're getting about other people, about the world, about the things that we're seeing. We delete, distort, and generalize the things that we're getting in our brain, and we create a small internal representation. So if we get 2 million bits per second of information from our environment using our senses, VAKOG, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, olfactory, gustatory. If we get all that information from our environment, it's coming at us all the time. We can't pay attention to all of it all the time. We have to dumb it down. Our brain literally can't deal with all that information per second. So it dumbs it down into 134 bits of usable information that we create internal representations of that stuff out of. And when we make that internal representation, it automatically cannot represent the entire 2 million bits per second that we originally received. It has to represent just a small portion of that. Now, when we do that, when we delete, distort, and generalize in order to get to this 134 bits, we make decisions about what we delete, what we distort, and what we generalize. We do that so fast, it's such an unconscious process that we don't even realize what we've trimmed out in order to get to that 134 bits. And so we do that using our filters, not just our senses, but our filters, right? All the therapists here know we use filters to filter out the world. Everyone has biases. So the filters are something like your beliefs about yourself, your beliefs about the world, your how you're feeling that day. Your physiology can create filters, right? What time of the month it is, et cetera, et cetera. What is the moon doing? Some people would say. That's a legitimate question to ask when you're talking about filters, et cetera. And so this internal representation is not the territory. It is the map that we create in order to navigate the world. If your internal representation is consistently, I have so much to do. You get up and your internal representation immediately, the things that you notice in your environment when you wake up in your bed and you look around, and all that you could notice is that you have so much to do. That's a more disempowering internal representation than, what am I going to do today, etc. And so when we talk about internal representations, we have an internal representation for everything. Some can be more empowering than others. If the 134 bits over here that we're getting is not empowering, then our goal with our clients is to help them change so that they notice this 134 bits instead. Or they go from noticing that to an overlapping yet different one. The map is not the territory. Okay, so that brings us to the opportunity to actually deep dive into the Meta Model. When I named this webinar, admittedly, I named it the wrong thing. I said we're going to talk about NLP presuppositions, and then when I went into my manual, I noticed that we're going to talk about linguistic presuppositions, not NLP presuppositions, and also that we have to talk about the Meta Model first before we get to linguistic presuppositions. So I just am giving this to you as like a label so that you can, if you want to learn Meta Model later, you can go look that up. It's all over the internet. Meta Model essentially was created by Virginia Satir. And there's a lot of different ideas in this theory. We're going to go through her definitions of the common deletions, distortions, and generalizations that people do when they are representing information. Does that make sense to everyone? Does anyone have any questions about that? No. So essentially, she's talking about the main deletions, distortions, and generalizations that people make when they're representing information. And when we do that, we can actually use our language to notice what deletions, distortions, and generalizations we're making. And she gets really specific. She's someone who's really, really good at getting really specific about what people are saying. There's the opposite of that. The opposite of the meta model, getting really, really specific, is the hypnotic model, getting really, really unspecific or broad. Milton Erickson did that. As you could think of Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson as two opposites on the same spectrum, where Virginia Satir is helping people by getting more specific about their model of the world, and Erickson is helping them loosen their model of the world by increasing the possibilities ultimately. And you can use both in tandem with each other. It's not like they're opposing theories, okay? Milton Erickson is the father of hypnosis for anybody or he's considered the father of hypnosis for anyone who didn't know what the heck I was saying. Okay, so we're going to look at different deletions, distortions, and generalizations. I'm going to go through this part quickly. This is why I wanted to give you the PowerPoint so that you can kind of go back and read if you kind of miss one. Because once we go through these, your unconscious mind is going to easily remember them as we do the exercise afterwards. Okay, so deletions, some common deletions. Being unspecific is generally a meta model problem. It's a way where we don't actually say the thing we mean to say. Unspecified verbs are verbs in a sentence that don't fully describe the action taking place. My friend hurt me. How specifically did your friend hurt you? And then you can learn more about yourself or about the other person. Lack of referential index. A lack of referential index existed where there are unspecified nouns and where you don't know who or what is specifically being referred to. So if someone comes to you, and if a client actually says, and you can hear people say this all the time, that these unspecified things, people scare me. Which people do you mean? Who specifically scares you? Everyone can hear me still, right? I'm getting some feedback. Yeah, okay. Cool. So you can ask those who specifically questions to get down to the bottom of this. Simple deletions. Ultimately, these are just where you simply delete information in a sentence, but you can still infer. But sometimes when you do a simple deletion, it makes it more difficult for people to understand what you're saying. Please give me the report. Which report specifically? Comparative deletions. This is what some people do when they are doing hypnosis. So, for example, comparative deletions are hypnotic words where we make a comparison but don't explain what we're comparing. There's some kind of standard of judgment involved, but it isn't made clear. Better, bigger, smarter than. Advertisers are really good at this. Better than whom or what specifically? Right? Okay, I see some nods. Okay, we're going to move on to distortions. Nominalizations. Nominalizations are processes or verbs we turn into nouns. By doing that, we take away some of the meaning of the verb. The problem is my relationship. How are you relating? Problem is my running. How are you running? Etc. This one's a lot of fun. You could, and this is another one is gratitude. Start practicing gratitude. It would be better to say, start being grateful. Does that make sense? Yes. Because when you use a nominalization, people have to hop over what you're saying to get to the doing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Cool. Okay, mind reading. Everyone knows this from CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. This is like one of the cognitive distortions. I like how it's said here more because I am biased. Mind reading is assuming you know what the other person is thinking or feeling without checking. I know you don't want to come. How specifically do you know? When did you learn that? This is really fun in couples therapy. Lost performative. Lost performatives are when someone is talking about a personal belief, but presents it as a thought, as though it was universal truth. Vitamins are an essential part of our diet. According to whom? These are assumptions. Therapists make these assumptions all the time in supervision sessions. Oh, the borderline clients. How specifically borderline? According to whom are they borderline? What specifically are their symptoms, etc.? There's 8 billion people in the world. There are 8 billion ways to be borderline, etc. You know, you could go into the specifics, and that might help to get more information. Cause and effect. Cause-effect statements are where X causes Y, or that doing X makes Y happen. This is also a CBT thinking error that we hear about. Like all beliefs, just because we believe something, it doesn't make it true. You make me so angry. How specifically do I make you angry? This is really, really fun to use in arguments with your significant other. They love it. But, that's a good point. Sometimes with these questions, we call it meta murder, where we meta model murder people by like getting a little bit too specific or unceremoniously or without being very kind, lack of a better word. We can use these meanly. You can all still hear me, yeah? Yeah. Yet that could be a useful question. How specifically do I make you angry? Like, tell me more about that, depending on your tone. Complex equivalence. Complex equivalences involve constructing beliefs out of distortions. It is making two experiences equal that may not be equal. So it's not a necessarily cause and effect situation. It is more of I'm making these two things the same erroneously. If you aren't wealthy by the time you're 30, you never will be. How specifically is age related to wealth? Cool. Good. Okay, and we're moving on to generalizations. Universal quantifiers. When using universal quantifiers, you are saying there are no exceptions, and therefore there are no choices. And everything we do as practitioners is to increase choice, right? We want people, having choices is empowering, ultimately. We want people to feel like they have choice. Okay, an example. This always happens to me every time. Now, recall a time when it didn't happen, and your client will always be able to do that. Okay. Modal operators of impossibility or possibility. We often talk about things as though they are not possible to achieve or do. Our unconscious accepts these as limitations. These are words such as can't or it's impossible. I can't get that up that early to exercise. What would happen if you did? Well, I'd be tired. Okay, let's talk about that. Perhaps that's more of the issue. Modal operator of necessity. This one's also a sticky one. We often feel we have to do particular things and have no choice. Words such as should, must, have to, need. The shoulds, everyone has heard that. Shoulding all over yourself. I have to get up early to clean. What would happen? What would happen if you didn't? The house would be messy. Well, what about that? Well, that would make me feel XYZ. So you get more information that way. And now we're going to talk about presuppositions that you can notice in people's language that might point you to the underlying structure. So the language that you just noticed, in those examples, we call that the surface structure of language. So those different deletions, distortions, and generalizations in the meta model, they describe how the surface structure of people's language. And what we're hoping to get at is the underlying deep structure or the meaning of what they're saying. NLP presuppositions are just tip-offs. They're clues in the surface structure of people's language that can lead you into the deeper structure. Does that make sense to everyone? A linguistic presupposition is something that is overtly expressed in the body of the statement itself, which must be accepted in order for the sentence to make sense in our English language. That doesn't mean that every presupposition in itself is true. It just means that we're using it to make sense of the deep structure of what we're saying. Presuppositions and linguistic assumptions are useful to know about because it can help you recognize what's assumed by a client's speech and ultimately lead you to helping them recognize what may be assumed. And then it can also assist you in creating new internal representations for the client. So for example, if the client is always using modal operators of necessity, I know I need to do this. I've got to do this. I really should be doing this, etc. You can use that. It's not unethical to use these things when encouraging your client. You could say, well, you know how you said you should do that? Imagine if you should do this instead. You're using the modal operator of necessity, something that makes sense to their brain. They use that often in their speech. You can use that to guide them into learning a different possibility that perhaps you both have talked about or alluded to in a sense. Cool. Does anyone have any questions about that? I know you're all wondering and learning. And
well, I was just going to say, if you said, imagine if you should do that instead. And we're always taught that you shouldn't suggest and help them get to what they should and shouldn't.
yes.
How does that fit in with this? I'm trying to kind of imagine myself actually saying this, and I'm almost feeling like, ugh.
Yeah. Unless they've told, if you use the miracle question or you do a goal setting session, they've stated their goal is this or that. And they've stated there's just some ways I could get to it, but I can't because X, Y, Z, I have kids, whatever. And then you say, you could just say, imagine if you were to believe that you should do that thing that you told me as a goal instead. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when you use it ethically, what that means is you're following the desires of the client. You're respecting the desire of the client, yet formulating language to match the way that they use language in order to help them get to that goal that they've already stated. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
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 Thanks, Samantha.
It would be totally unethical for you to tell them what they should or shouldn't do
Yeah.
without like them telling you first. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. But if it's in line with something they've already identified as a goal, then it's almost like empowering them with the language for it.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Empowering them by matching and mirroring their language. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is a deeper way of matching and mirroring. That's what is being described in this slide. Like it's actually matching and mirroring the linguistic presuppositions that your clients use. If they're always talking about how they feel really crunchy when they are talking to their mother-in-law, you can use that presupposition, which is referencing their kinesthetic experience, to then notice a new pathway according to their goals. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So again, it's got to be matched to what the client has already shared is useful for them. You know what I mean? Yeah. So these are the presuppositions that could tip off what the client is making meaning of underneath. Okay. Nouns. You could notice. I should have done I'll show you in the next. Maybe I'll show a paragraph. Milton Erickson wrote something that is so brilliant, but we'll pull apart the different presuppositions in that paragraph. So nouns. So like if I said, I imagine there's a plant behind me. The noun is the plant. Okay. A modal operator of necessity and possibility. Every time I see my mom, there's an argument. Every time is the modal operator of necessity. Okay. Or I always make a good choice. Always is the modal operator of necessity. Cause and effect. This is what makes a good therapist. I used makes. This, whatever I'm referencing. NLP training is what makes a good therapist. Now we've just created a cause and effect statement. If you're not careful, then you might fall. Now that's just, cause and effect. You've just made something cause something else. That isn't necessarily the truth. A lot of people do this with toddlers. Okay. Complex equivalent is or means. That means if you want to convince someone of something, explain something, and then say that means XYZ. You're making equivalent two things. Does that make sense? So what's one like that? If your client's looking down, that means they're sad. That's not true. You know what I mean? But you could see as though that would be true. Okay, verbs, awareness. So what I was getting at before with the whole, I feel crunchy, she's using a presupposition that's a kinesthetic presupposition, crunchy, to tip off how she makes sense of information. Okay, so people who use visual presuppositions, I always use visual presuppositions. It tips off how I represent information visually. I have clients that are purely auditory, and they're like, I'm always hearing about people saying this, this tells me how their awareness is. Does that make sense? They're representing information auditorily. Okay, time. You could tell time by listening to the client's verb tense. I always used to do this, or you could say, I haven't done that yet. There's obvious ones that you can tell where the client is in time, but that's important. If the client is all the way in the future all the time, I'm going to be doing this instead of in the present or the past, or if they're always in the past instead of the present or the future, that could create problems for them. And ultimately, it shows you that they're believing something about time that may not necessarily be true, something to challenge or something to redirect. Adverb or adjective, just listen for the descriptor words that they say. Exclusive or inclusive or. I can do this or that. And you might say, what if you were to do both? You know what I mean? Or what if you were to do none? That's always helpful. Clients make a list of things. This, and this, and this have to happen. Or I don't want this, or that. And it's like, usually when they've done that, they've grouped information together. So it's helpful to ungroup information sometimes, or to regroup it, to help them regroup it if that's what's called for. Okay, so all of this is about shifting language. This is a brilliant question that will help you to improve your questions when you're working with people. And this is what Tad James is brilliant at. What is the question that I can ask, which by the very nature of the presuppositions in the question itself will cause the client to make the greatest amount of change by having to accept the presuppositions inherent in the question? That's what people are talking about when they're talking about ask good questions. They're inviting you to presuppose in your question the things that would help the client make the most change for that client. So, for example, it may not be helpful to ask clients who are stuck in necessity to questions that would increase their focus on things that are possible, right? Because they don't naturally go and use the modal operator of possibility. They often go to and use the modal operator of necessity. So in some situations, it may be helpful for you to say, and what if you needed to do this instead, rather than what if you could do this instead? It may enter their model of the world more easily. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Very cool. You could, in order to get good at this, it's important to get good at noticing presuppositions and those deletions, distortions, and generalizations that people are making when they are representing information in a session or in conversation, or that you're representing to yourself. I'm going to invite you to do some things. I just ask that if you got something out of this, you leave a good Google review on my my business, or not. But that would be great if you did. And then follow me and sign up for emails. I'm going to I think I put the sign up for email link in the chat above our beliefs. I'll be doing webinars like this probably every 8 weeks, every 2 months, just on small NLP snippets as I prep for actually training. It's coming. We're going to do it. It'll definitely be a paid offering, but I'm definitely going to make it therapist accessible. So it's not going to be the Tony Robbins $5,000 offer. Oh, we'll make it therapist accessible when that happens. Yeah, I encourage you to get really curious about this stuff. You could research all about NLP presuppositions or the meta model online. So I'll read this to you as a nice send off today. I know that you are wondering, and it's a good thing to wonder because that means you are learning many things. And all the things that you can learn provide you with new insights and new understandings. And you can you not? One can, you know. And it's more or less the right thing. You are sitting here listening to me, looking at me, and that means your unconscious mind is also here and can hear what I say. And since that's the case, you're probably learning about this and already know more at an unconscious level than you think you do. And it's not right for me to tell him, learn this or learn that. Let him learn in any way he wants, in any order. Do you feel this? Is this something you understand? Awesome.